Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from yourblackworld.com. I was thinking this week about something that I saw with a spat between Jim Brown and Kobe Bryant, and I wrote an article about it. But I sometimes, every now and then, I kind of feel that writing doesn't quite get the point across in terms of what I'm trying to say. And I think what inspired me to talk about it a little more is I saw an article from someone that I have so much respect for. His name is Atan Thomas, and Atan played for the Washington Wizards, and Atan's a great friend of mine. He's also out of Syracuse. He played basketball at Syracuse, and he's my boy. I respect what he's doing. He's been promoting fatherhood in the black community, and anybody who knows anything about what I do, you know that I believe deeply in fatherhood. I don't care that people think that it's politically incorrect for me to say that every child should have the chance to have a father. Well, if you don't agree, then I just say screw you on that. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and let black men be disrespected that way, and I'm not going to let black children be disrespected, nor black women. So that's just not what I do. I mean, and what's funny too when you talk about that is when you talk about accountability, it's interesting that discussions on accountability are impacted by the lack of accountability that people want to have. The first thing people typically do when you hold them accountable is they point the finger. If you hold black men accountable, you'll hear brothers say, "Well, what about black women?" And if you hold black women accountable, they'll say, "Well, what about black men?" And I just said, "Well, why can't we all just be accountable and stop trying to shift the blame onto other people?" When you talk about hip hop, you'll talk about what the artists are doing. The artists will say, "Well, what about the parents?" And I was like, well, what about kids who don't have any parents? I mean, those kids grow up and they kill the kids who do have good parents. So it does take a village, and I do believe that we should all have some degree of accountability. The term personal responsibility is not monopolized by the Republican Party. Responsibility is important when you talk about building family and building community, and that's what we're doing with the new paradigm tour. Is we're talking about wealth, education, family, and community. We need a new paradigm of thought if we're going to move forward, or we're going to sit here looking like a bunch of idiots with, like hamsters sitting in a cage with our wheels spinning and us not going anywhere. Now, I'm going to dig deeper into this thing with Kobe Bryant, and Jim Brown. I will give a background and say I don't care what anybody thinks. I think as an athlete and as a black man, Jim Brown is pretty much second to none. I'm not saying that he's perfect. I wouldn't say anybody's perfect. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. But in terms of maximizing his athletic ability for the benefit of the black community, there's really nobody like Jim Brown. And I think it's important that we acknowledge him for his greatness because white people will never do it. White people, unfortunately, or those who care to continue oppressing you, they will never congratulate you for fighting for true equality. They will never congratulate you for commanding your self-respect. They will never congratulate you for fighting for what you deserve. They will only congratulate you for aligning yourself with their agenda. They will only congratulate you if you're doing what they want you to do. And that's not a racism thing. That's not a white people thing. It's just a human thing. So this idea that we're seeking validation from the people who are wired to oppress us, that's a mental illness. I mean, that's sick. If you think that way, you are sick. The idea that we depend on the descendants of our historical oppressors to feed our children, that is a mental illness. That's a sickness. It doesn't make any sense. So when I think about Jim Brown, I think about a black man who, similar to Malcolm X and a few other strong black men that we've had in our community, he refused to allow society to castrate him. Even in the 60s and 50s, and he refused to allow them to tell him what to do. That's why Syracuse University really doesn't celebrate him the way they should. He's really the greatest athlete Syracuse has ever had, and they've had a lot of good athletes, but they don't recognize him as such because they would rather make films. I think they made a film about another guy. I think it was Ernie Davis, and they portrayed Jim Brown as this angry militant black man who was never satisfied. And I just thought that was an unfair portrayal. But then again, I mean, who's making the movie, right? It's not black people are not making these movies. So Jim Brown is a great man. He's a great athlete, every bit as good as anybody out here. But also, you know, he gave black people a sense of pride and self-respect and decency, which unfortunately even a lot of black people are not wired to command their self-respect. Because we're so used to being disrespected. We're so used to being second-class citizens. So even for black folks who do try to speak up and say, look, we deserve equality, we deserve to be treated fairly, you have black people who are the first in line to get in the way of that. And this is not something new. This has been around since slavery. I mean, this is what we have been wired and trained to do, to stand in each other's way. And that's pretty much what people do when they have low self-esteem. Now, Jim Brown called out Kobe Bryant because he felt that Kobe is not identifying very much with the black community. And that's kind of consistent, in my mind, that's consistent with what Harry Belafonte said about Jay-Z. I see that kind of in the same line of logic to sort of say, look, you know, we passed you the baton and you guys have dropped it off. You guys have dropped everything meaningful in life so you can go chase down a corporate sponsorship, so you can dribble basketball in front of thousands of white people and somehow get a validation from that. You're not being men. You're not being intelligent men. You're not standing up for your community. You're not using the massive, massive, massive amounts of power that you have to help anybody other than yourself. And I tend to agree with Jim because this notion that we have people who are successful and wealthy who owe nothing to anybody but themselves, well, that's bullshit. I'm sorry, excuse my French, but that's bullshit because you stood on the back of the black community to get to where you are, to become who you are, to get the wealth that you have. So how dare you build off of that community and then feel like you owe that community nothing? That's ignorant. And I just say flat out, people like that should be rejected. They should be banished. If you don't care about the black community, then the black community should not care about you. We are not your convenient mistress that you can come and fuck whenever you want to and then run off and spend time with your wife. No, that's not what the black community is meant to be. And in a way, I'm speaking as a member of the black community, but I'm also speaking as one of these privileged people who, you know, has been on TV. I've been on national television probably 1,000 times now, and I make more money than most people do. I'm considered in the 1%, as Barack Obama calls them. So I am in that category of people who I think should be expected to give back. So this notion that people can just do whatever they want, I mean, that's stupid. That makes no sense to me. And when people think that way, I don't have a lot of patience for that. I can't just sort of be politically correct and be nice about it, because the fact is that we have too many problems for people to sit on the sidelines, for people to eat up all the food and not want to cook nothing, for people who want to get all the benefits but don't want to do any of the work. I'm not with that. That doesn't make any sense to me. So, you know, I think that when you talk about Jim and you talk about Harry Belafonte, I think these men have earned their stripes. I think they deserve to be respected. I think they deserve to some extent, I mean, when it comes to activism anyway, not their personal lives, I don't know nothing about all that, but activism, I consider them to be beyond reproach. I don't think that Jay-Z and Kobe have a right to talk back to these men, because what have you done? You really haven't done anything. And the other interesting thing, and this is something I was talking to my business manager about, which led me to kind of reflect on this and openly, because I was like, you know, I really don't want to write about this because people may not get what I'm trying to say. But, you know, one of the things that came to mind was I realized, I think, why there's a gap between athletes of today and athletes of, say, 40, 50 years ago. If you go back to Jim Brown's era, back when athletes used to used to stand up for issues. They used to hold, like they could get hundreds of athletes to boycott the Olympics in 1968. They didn't go through with the boycott, because there were some athletes who didn't want to do it, but there were a lot of athletes who did. You had black athlete summits that Jim Brown and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Muhammad Ali and all these other guys, Bill Russell, all these guys would come together and stand up and speak up on important issues of the day, because they felt that they had a platform that was meant to be used for the greater good. Well, understand this. Think about this. Those individuals, many of them, they were well educated. They went to college and studied at HBCUs, a lot of them, because they couldn't go to white universities maybe, or at the very least, they didn't forego their opportunity to get a good education so that they could just become an athlete. They saw themselves as men, as human beings, as potential husbands and fathers, and not just dumb jocks, studs, I guess they would call them studs on the farm, or those, just basically meant for chilling and breeding and playing a sport. Like, they were deeper than that. They meant more than that to themselves and to each other and to the world. Now, fast forward that to today. Athletes today can be compared, unfortunately, many professional athletes, not all of them, but a lot of them. I don't put guys like Etan Thomas in this category. I'm talking about a lot of the brothers we see, though. Many of them are a lot more like KFC chickens that are born and bred for consumption than they are like actual human beings. And let me explain this. Most of these guys who were playing in the NBA and the NFL, they were identified as extraordinary athletes at the age of 10 or 11 years old. From that time, they were treated different. They were given all these accolades for being extraordinary athletes. They were put into special athletic programs, where they would go and play in these big AAU games and all this stuff because they were good athletes. And basketball is kind of ridiculous. If you're a good basketball player, you're getting free sneakers, you're getting invited to these Adidas camps and all this stuff. For many of them, especially those in public schools, many of them were being passed from grade to grade by their teachers. So it was a great partnership. If you're a basketball player and all you think about is basketball, then you don't want to think about studying. And your teacher, who's white, doesn't really care about your future, so they're going to just pass you along. It's not like being taught in, say, a black school or a segregated school where the teacher doesn't care about the fact that you're a good athlete. She cares about your future. In this case, in the public school, it's like, well, let's let Raekwon pass to the 11th grade because we want to win the championship. So even in high school, you're in a different world. You're being, you're being put in this special place. You're being, if you don't come and fight for an education, no one's going to really force you to get one. So then you get to where you're being heavily recruited by these universities who are making billions of dollars off of African-American athletes and their families and not giving them hardly anything, just giving them a scholarship, even though these white guys are getting $8 million a year contracts. So you are part of their hoopla. You get recruited by a big university. When they bring you in, first of all, if you're really good, they will cheat on your ACT. They will let you in even if you can't read. I've seen this happen. I've been teaching on the college campus for 20 years. I've seen this happen where athletes have been admitted to college who, A, the university did not expect that person to ever graduate, or B, in many cases, I've seen athletes who actually could not read who were admitted to universities. You and I can't do that, but there are athletes who can do that because these universities, they love their money. I mean, if you're talking about getting a $20 million check for winning a championship, and all you got to do is let this kid into your school, you're going to do whatever you got to do. I mean, they try to pretend like they're high and mighty and above all that, but that's not true. They'll take that money. So you come into the campus, you're put into a special dorm away from all the other students. You're surrounded by white folks. You're not really told to get involved with like the Black Student Union or to get connected to conscious people on campus. You might do that. Some athletes do that. Like when I was at the University of Kentucky, there were a few basketball players who used to come and sneak and read my articles. But one of them specifically told me that the coaches didn't want them reading my articles because I would say things like college athletes should be paid. This was back when I was young, when I was like 24, 25 years old. And they didn't want those ideas in their head. I mean, if you're trying to control your chicken or your cow that you're breeding strictly for consumption, you don't want that cow to think about trying to be free. You don't want that cow to be doing anything other than sitting on the farm, eating all day, and waiting to become somebody's piece of steak. You pump it up with steroids, you feed it, you have it sit there, make it fat and happy, and then you get to consume that cow. So unfortunately, many athletes, not all of them, again, this is not all of them, but many of them are raised in a way where they are trained to be fat and happy. So they're kind of pumped up with the steroids, with the hype of being a big time player, surrounded. They're in a dorm typically where everything's basketball, basketball, basketball. You're surrounded by white people, not really conscientious black people. Educationally, they choose your major for you in many cases. They don't really advocate or push you to study that hard. And if you're good enough, they will pass you through. And so then you make it to the NBA or the NFL. and you've done pretty much what you're supposed to do. You've been born and bred to be nothing but a dumb jock. Or like the studs on the farm. You know, the big bull stud. I mean, he's full of the steroids. He's full of food. He's supposed to go around and maybe fuck, you know, the female bulls, I guess the heifers or whatever, on the farm, and so they can reproduce. He's not really meant to really do much else except for what he's supposed to do on the farm. He's supposed to be fat and happy and built for consumption. So athletes, they get to the NFL, you're all big because you got all these steroids pumped into you. Everything has been about your development of your physical body. Your mind, unfortunately, has been left behind. Your mind was never developed. You were never made into anything other than a dumb jock. And so when I look at guys like the Kobe Bryants and other guys like that, you know, I just see athletes. I just see guys who can't even begin to comprehend what a Jim Brown is saying, because unfortunately many of them are just not educated on issues that relate to black people. And then also on top of that, many of them are controlled in a way that's similar to like a prostitute. You know, with a prostitute, you want your prostitute to be dumb. You want your prostitute to be on drugs. You want your prostitute to be fearful of you. You want them under your thumb. So the dumb part, that works. I mean, a lot of brothers, unfortunately, when they get to the league, many of them never went to college. Some of them went to college for a year. A lot of them never learned how to read. So that part is established. And then you get to the fact of, you know, keeping the prostitute on dope. Well, the dope is not physical dope, but you talk about financial dope. You have money. You know, you pretty much know that if you are a good boy, if you are well behaved, if you don't get involved with those radical black people like me, stuff like that, then you're going to be good. You're going to get that endorsement deal from Nike, that endorsement deal from Adidas, whatever it is you're trying to get, you're going to get money. And again, you talk about a person who never really learned how to value anything other than money, so that's what's up, right? You get that money. And then the last part, in terms of being under the thumb of oppression or control, well, it's easy to control a dumb hooker that's hooked on drugs. It's not that, I mean, you can scare her. All you do is threaten to pull back the pimp hand, and she's going to shake and get right back in line. And a lot of athletes understand that, especially at the college level. It's really bad at the college level. It's also bad at the professional level, that if they get out of line, if they say the wrong thing, if they speak up on an issue, even if they're speaking from a position of truth, they're going to get pimp slapped. There's always a white man standing above them to pimp slap them. And I can just tell you an example. When I met with Minister Louis Farrakhan, he told me a story about an NBA athlete whose name I won't mention, who wanted to come and see him. And basically, this athlete did not come because he was told by higher ups in the league that it would be bad for him to be associated with a man like Minister Farrakhan. So what I'm trying to say here is we need to rethink how we raise our black men. Unfortunately, to go further with that analogy of an athlete being raised like a pig on a farm or a cow on a farm, if you think about the cow on the farm, the only goal is to make that cow fat, keep that cow fat and happy until you can use that cow for whatever your purpose is. You might want to chop him up and make him into a juicy steak or whatever. And then, so once he's made it to a certain point, you're done with him. You throw him away. He's useless. Well, if you consider what happens to so many of our black athletes, what happens when I'm not talking about all the athletes, but think about a stereotype. Think about a brother who fully embraces the culture that is promoted within athletics, which is kind of a mixture with hip hop culture. Think about what happens to that brother, you know, when he is run around from woman to woman, got a whole bunch of damn babies mamas and STDs to go with it. And child support too that he won't be able to pay once his contract is up. Look at Terrell Owens and all these other guys who are pretty much born to be big studs, and now they little crying babies because they can't afford to pay their child support. So he's got a bunch of babies mamas and STDs. He's got a bunch of financial problems because he has wasted his money. He's not well educated. He smokes weed and does all the other stuff that they think brothers are supposed to do, run into the club popping bottles. So with that comes a series of addictions to either alcohol or drugs, or maybe the drugs that they pump you up with while you're in the NFL so you can go out there and play. And this is real. I mean, you've seen this. So think about this. So imagine this guy has pretty much spent his whole life like that cow on the farm who's been born and bred to perform a certain role. You're not meant to be free. That cow on the farm is not born and bred to be free in the woods. Or that chicken on the farm is not meant to be a free range bird. He's meant to basically get fat and comfortable so he can be taken away on the KFC truck. So basically, as an athlete, if you unfortunately have fallen into that trap where all you are is an athlete, then what happens when you can't play anymore? What happens when they cut you from that team? So you think that you're going to be balling for the rest of your life. You think you're going to be rich, but really you end up as a 25, 26-year-old with bad knees and a fifth grade reading level. So this man comes back to the black community just like that cow on the farm, worthless to the community, unfortunately. He ain't got no education. He's got a bunch of babies, mamas, and problems and STDs. He's maybe got an addiction to drugs or alcohol or whatever. He's got a series of financial problems that he created with all the money that he wasted throughout the years. And then maybe a bunch of other bad habits that he picked up along the way. And again, I'm not saying every athlete is like this, but you know the stereotype and you've seen it. It's not like this stereotype is not true. It's not like we can't think of examples of athletes where this happens. I think a perfect prototype of this, unfortunately, as much as I hate to say it, is probably a guy like Allen Iverson. I mean, you look at poor Allen. I mean, think about what Allen could have been if he had been well educated, if he had been empowered to stand up for his community, if he had the mind of a Muhammad Ali. Think about what Allen Iverson would have been if he'd had the courage of a Muhammad Ali, maybe the responsibility of an Etan Thomas who promotes fatherhood, maybe the education level of the guy that played at Florida State. I can't remember his name, but he was a Rhodes Scholar. If you put all that together, I mean, Allen Iverson could have been one of the greatest men of all time, in all of history. With that kind of platform, with that kind of power, that kind of purpose, he could have been an amazing person. But instead, he's broke, he's depressed, he's got a series of financial problems, his life is a complete mess. And even worse than that for him, and again, I'm not picking on Allen, I'm just talking about any brother who's in this situation. You could throw Terrell Owens, Chad Johnson, you got a long list of athletes to choose from. What's worse to me is that that person, unfortunately, has been taught, like that chicken on the farm who's raised to be fed at KFC, they've been taught that they are meant to do one thing in the world, and that's to play a damn sport, to dribble a damn basketball, to throw a football. That's all you're meant to do. Look at Vince what's-his-face that played for Texas. Vincent Young. Vince Young thought he was going to be in the NFL forever. I saw him on the cover of ESPN, the magazine, and I remember that cover, and it bothered me even then because at that point he was at his peak. I had just seen him win a national championship against USC. A lot of you might remember that game if you're a sports fan. And I remember on the cover it said, "I was born to play quarterback at the University of Texas." That means that you have defined yourself to be no different from a cow raised on a farm that is meant to be fed to a bunch of consumers. So you think that with all the greatness God gave you, all the potential God gave you, all the opportunities God gave you, that all you were meant to do was play quarterback at the University of Texas at a school with a bunch of white people that doesn't admit black people, who don't throw a football or dribble a basketball. That's what all you're meant to do, is to be consumed by white people, just like that chicken at KFC. We cannot allow our children to think that way. How is that going to change? I don't know. But I can say that maybe me saying this to you on a video will inspire you to share this idea with a young man or young woman coming up, to help them realize that you're more than an athlete. Because if you look at Vince Young, that example, I mean, Vince is kind of a mess now. Vince is broke. Vince got cut from the NFL. From what I understand, Vince is not, he's not a Rhodes Scholar. So what's he gonna do? What's he gonna bring to the black community relative to what he could have brought if he'd had that same athletic ability with this to go with it? So all I say to brothers is, look, I mean, I'm not telling people to be like me. I mean, you ain't got to go out and, run your mouth and get in trouble. I mean, I get in so much trouble for the things I say, and I think for a living. That's what I do, right? But I just think you should think for yourself. We have to teach our boys to think for themselves. We have to teach them how to think independently, how to think intelligently, how to be, and not to just be intelligent, but to also be courageous. Stop being scared. What are you afraid of? You have black men going to prison at a level that is nothing short of an absolute holocaust. You have black unemployment that is at crisis levels. It doesn't seem like a big deal because nobody says anything. If it were happening to white people, it would be on national television every day. You have children being educated in schools where they get to the 12th grade and nobody teaches them how to read. You have babies being shot in the street and you can't speak up on that? What the hell is wrong with you? I'm going to stop talking now because as you can see, it bothers me that we have so much apathy, that we just somehow think that we have people that really think that it's okay for somebody to get to the top of the world, have $100 million in their bank account and all the power in the world and not use that power to help anybody but themselves. Well, I say that's bull. I say that's wrong. I say that we challenge that and I say we speak up against that. And if you see it, stop it. If you see something, say something, because unfortunately these vultures are terrorists to the black community. And just like they say in New York when they talk about Al-Qaeda and all these other terrorists that we think are out there, if you see something, say something. That means that if you see that brother who thinks that all he's meant to do is to be a football player and that's it, say something to him about the importance of education. If you see that person who has the Bentley and the big house and thinks that they don't owe anybody anything, say something. Let them know that there are people that can use their help and that the community did help make them into who they are. If we don't come together as a people, then we are going to fail. We are going to fail miserably, and we are going to continue to fall on our face. So let's do this for the next generation. Let's change the tone. Let's change the conversation, because I don't know about you, but I'm getting tired of it. Well, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from YourBlackWorld.com. Thank you for sitting with me for 26 minutes and 31 seconds. Believe it or not, I only plan to talk for 5 or 6 minutes, but sometimes it just comes out. So until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. I am gone. Peace.